Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is your Ukrainian guide, Olena. And in this video, I'd like to talk to Christina Katrakis. Again and again, it's always a pleasure and big honor to talk to Christina. Hello, Christina, nice to meet you.
Hi, and Merry Christmas. Half of Ukraine is celebrating Christmas today, so I have red lipstick on. One day when I can afford it in the prolonged war and mourning. So it's a
Very,
pleasure
very,
talking to you always, and pleasure having you as our ambassador of light. Honor.
thank you. It's very beautiful. I love your red lipstick, really. It's like the sign of, victory is coming.
It is. I have Azovstal on my hand.
Well, this is an unusual interview. I think this is the first interview when it was not me asking for interview, but it was Christina who had an idea that we have to talk about a serious topic, and we have to talk about nuclear threats of Russia. Christina, what triggered you to talk about it?
Well, Lena, I did send you some messages that I got, both from our Russian fans, that were trying to break my computer, break your computer, my phone, your phone. I mean, it means that we're doing something right. That's how I see it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have such lovely fans in our midst. And then I also got some messages from our Western listeners, right? We got messages from Canadians, from Americans. And so I think we need to address that after our interview, to put to peace maybe some issues that came up. So should we start with Russian fans and then move to the allies? I guess that's the best. So the Russian fans were very concerned that you and I are calling for unity. Okay, so it is obviously the greatest threat right now to Kremlin, because all these are fake accounts and bots that are, doing this job. So for them, there are two great threats. So one is unity, is that Ukraine will be united with the rest of the world in this war for democracy and light, right? The other thing that threatens them is the idea that we're saying, well, wake up, smell the roses, World War III has begun, because they still don't want you to see that. They still want you to be afraid. They still want you to be afraid of nuclear and, whatever it may be, and that it's a Russian thing, and that Russians have to solve it, on their own. And of course, the third issue that came up from our Russian fans was that, we got nuclear. So basically, this is a rhetoric that we see seeping in actually through Western media, because they're influencing Western media. And we know how Kremlin was involved in politics in the United States, in basically elections, and many, many issues. They are influencing media greatly. So whenever you see things like we can press the button, or it is not our war, or let's leave Ukraine aside, let's concentrate on our mass, this means this is Kremlin media at work, and Kremlin propaganda at work, that is influencing through their resources Western media. Okay, so these were the things that our Russian fans were saying. What our Canadian, American, Irish listeners were asking is, we would get involved, but they can press the button. So this is the common thing that I think you and I need to address, because it came up as a consequence of our conversation and the previous interview I gave.
Yeah,
Nobody.
People are afraid, yes, that Putin can press the button. Yeah, people are afraid to do anything, because, Putin is playing an idiot, like insane idiot, like don't irritate me, otherwise, yes, I will press the button. He behaves like a bully, and this is called nuclear terrorism. right? So he wants you to be afraid of it. He is terrorizing the world with nuclear weapons. So why
But
should we be afraid of it?
Elena, remember what the message that I sent to Putin last time about the small man? Well, we remember how a previous small man ended up, meaning Hitler, right? So let's understand that Putin is just one person. That one person does not decide the destiny of the button, okay? This has to be clear. This message has to like seep through, okay? There are many, many people around Putin that make that decision, okay, that take part in that. And these people would rather die, or rather see Putin die, than let this happen. And there are reasons for that. You see, the whole war began as a little experiment, okay? Russia wanted to have justification for many failures, economic failures, many other failures, social failures in their own country. And there is nothing better to justify shit in your own country than to start a war, because then everything is justified. Like, you don't have money, you don't have light, you don't have a toilet in your house. Well, we're at war. We need to group up, and we have things going. Remember the Great World War II? Well, that's how it is. So that justifies. So whatever was like falling apart now can be mended. Plus elections. Okay, so we had all this come through together, and they really thought that they calculated Ukraine and they bought out Ukraine. And perhaps, I don't want to point fingers, they bought a lot of higher up levels in Ukraine and thought that they truly could take Kiev in 3 days. And perhaps everything was ready for that. But they did not take one thing in the equation. They did not take in that equation Ukrainian people. And you and I are talking right now because of Ukrainian people. Because if not for Ukrainian people and for the spirit and the unity that happened in the beginning of the war, probably Russia would have taken Kiev in 3 days, because they thought on their FSB level, KGB level, right, that everything was arranged and organized, but did not think of the spirit of the people. So that's first aspect. When they realized that the small war to justify the failures in their own country is falling apart, and of course the war would have brought additional territories, additional streams of influence to the West, the prolonged toothache started. What are we seeing right now? Like, really, if Russia would have thought of using nuclear power, would they right now try to bring together 500,000 more recruits for their military? That's what they're calling for. They're calling for 500,000 new recruits. They already put to the front lines 300,000, right? And over 100,000 died. So they need about 1 million. That's their estimate to somewhat, balance the powers here. Even though Ukraine it's tiny in comparison to Russia. Russia is still the largest country in the world, So that's how pathetic the whole thing is unveiling. And it's really ugly for Russia, really kind of, a big blow, right? But let me explain why these people, the entourage of Putin that made Putin Putin, okay, and lied to Putin all these years, because they just wanted to stay in the same place. They just wanted to stay in the money, continue their corruption, continue their lifestyle, continue, stealing money from Russia and Russians, right? And so it was easier to lie to Putin and kind of, provoke that megalomania within him and keep on telling him that everything is hunky-dory and you're actually, Napoleon, you're Caesar, you can conquer the universe, and whatever. And when it came to it, the guy really believed, because there's psychological issues with the person, and they just grow as people make them grow, right? And so when it came to the war, we realized that there are no tanks, that everything is falling apart, everything was sold, destroyed, rusted, and all this picture that was painted to this poor, pathetic man was a lie. A lie, a major lie by his entourage. Okay, so now he's caught within that lie and he has to do something. In addition, Putin is gravely sick. We all know that he has cancer and other diseases, right? And at very bad stage, so to say. So it's like, waiting for Putin to die. Medics are keeping him alive, but, we know that sooner or later it will happen. But the button is controlled by his entourage, by many people. It's not the decision of just Putin picking up the phone and making that happen. And that entourage would rather kill Putin than would let him press the button, because then all their lifestyle, everything they were building for these decades will be gone. And they don't want that. They don't want that to happen because their funds are outside of Russia. Their children live outside of Russia, in luxurious, comfortable neighborhoods. And the last thing they want is for the nuclear war to begin and to nuke the rest of the world where the families live, where they are located. And they know that will be the end of Russia as is and the end of their power. They started this war to stay in power, to kind of push back the nation and say, okay, we have problems, economic problems, not because we were stealing for decades from y'all, but because, there's war. So now they have to come out of this in some way, okay? And the coming out of this will, one way or the other, for Russia will end at the discussion, just as it did for Germans, right? And finding solutions. And they will pay the price for what has been done. The second aspect why the nuclear thing will not happen, okay, is China. China is against nuclear thing. Its rhetorics again and again is, Beijing is against the nuclear thing, against Russia pressing the button, and Russia listens to China. Perhaps China is one of the greatest influences right now on Russia for two reasons. Russia hopes that China could be the ally, but Russia also knows subconsciously that China is their probably greatest enemy right now. So what China is doing? China is waiting for Russia to lose the war to Ukraine so they could take part of Russia. And trust me, it's going to be a bigger part than what Russia is taking right now from Ukraine. So there is a game inside of game inside of game. Okay? And before we say, oh, he's going to press the button, we have to understand who's he and where's the button, okay? And all the players involved.
One more thing that I'd like to add about, I'm not a big expert, but what I'm sure in is that if Putin could nuke and this would help to take Ukraine safe, he would already do it. Now, and the same before every big day, before the 9th of May when I was in Kiev, before the Independence Day of Ukraine when I was in Kiev, and there was this, fear that he's gonna destroy Kiev right now, destroy Ukraine right now. I was like, if he could, he would already do it, in the first 3 days, 3 weeks. The only reason why he doesn't do it, he can't. Yes, and you described the reasons why.
Allow them to do it. It's like a major poker game. So you sit at the poker table and you make that poker face, like, I'm gonna press the button, and nobody believes you because they all know the cards. That's the thing, So I just want average American, average European, average Australian, Canadian to hear this and to understand things at stake and what is truly going on. I think that a big plan, NATO plan, American plan behind it was also to, through the war in Ukraine, to make willful revolution within Russia happened, okay? Because they thought, Western partners thought that Russians would wake up. I mean, how many deaths does it take? How many dead soldiers that are just like compost there? They don't even pick them up, you know, they don't pick their own soldiers. They don't bury them. They don't need them. They're just like throwing bodies, you know. So how many bodies will it take for Russian people, for the nation to wake up? So now we have 100 plus, nothing happening, you know, nothing happening, because our Western partners did not take into consideration one simple thing. Russian nation, Russian people, there's no such thing as nation. It's a confederation of different, you know, nations and cultures, right? Held together by tyranny of Kremlin. But Russian people have been brainwashed for decades. And this, you know, I applaud to Russian media and Russian propaganda machine, because to brainwash the whole country to that extent, you know, well, maybe only North Korea could rival that, you know, but North Korea is very small comparing to Russia, right? So my thinking, it's 300 more will die, 1,000, right? When it will come to big cities like Moscow, St. Petersburg, right? And when it will come to every family. Now, mind you, of course, Kremlin is not sending their sons to war, right? So these are the regular Joes that are going to die for no reason. Then we will have something maybe happening within Russia. But most likely it will not be a great revolution that will just, you know, end up in democracy over the night. It could be a coup within the country, and the entourage of Putin will make sure that everything goes smoothly. But it's vain. We're waiting in vain for Russia to change. It's not going to change. And 100 more thousand dead soldiers, Russian sons, will not change the whole picture, because the nation has been brainwashed until there's no tomorrow. But this picture is very serious for Ukraine and the rest of the world, because 500,000 Russian soldiers deployed to fight against Ukraine for Ukrainians means live or die, okay? Because we are a small country comparison to Russia, okay? So that's why we have to understand that right now, the only thing that can save the world, save Ukraine, save democracy, because right now, Ukrainians are like that shield that's protecting the rest of the world from this tyranny, is unity, is actually coming, as I said before, and playing together, you know, shoulder to shoulder, like you guys did in Serbia, like we did in Iraq, like we did in Afghanistan, you know, fighting for democracy, combating terrorism, and, you know, stopping genocide. All these issues right now are in Ukraine, and Russia is proclaimed a terrorist state, but still we're not doing that for some reason. And it's not because of the button, because trust me, if you and I are talking about that, I'm sure the higher up levels know the picture very well, and they understand, and they see that poker game from day one. Otherwise, it wouldn't have started. But the point is, for Ukraine, right now, it's a breaking point. So we see good weapons coming in. I wish it would have started a year ago. You know, it would have saved, you know, hundreds, thousands of innocent Ukrainian lives were we to have these weapons. And you were in Kiev and you were facing all this. You were living through this terror, right? So you know better than anyone else how it was. And would we have that protection for the sky, you know, we wouldn't have innocent children die because of missiles back then. So question it, what took so long? And saying that, you know, if we give you sky protection, Russia would think that we're involved. Are you kidding me? This is, this is the lamest justification that one can hear or know or whatever. We're talking about sky protection. We're not talking about missiles that can reach Moscow. And we're not planning, Ukraine is not planning to nuke or throw missiles to Moscow. That's not our interest. Our interest is to hold our own territory and our country. And even when we have attacks by Ukrainian military, it is at the military bases based on Ukrainian territory, or from where the Russians are shooting. Ukrainians are not targeting Russian civilians, Russian children, Russian cities. And this is something important to understand. So when we have these kind of talks, it's really lame and pathetic. The other thing that really surprises me, for example, Irish News asked me over and over again about will they reciprocate? Will Russians do something because Ukrainians destroyed the Russian base based on Ukrainian territory? Okay, we're fighting a war for a year now. What do you mean? Will they do something? It's like, I attacked another country. I destroyed Moscow. I killed innocent. No, it's a military base based on Ukrainian territory, taken illegally by Russian troops. It's war, and Ukraine has been at war with this terrorist state for over a year alone. And only now we see some weapons coming. Only now we see, something happening. But what we need to see is shoulder to shoulder, is showing the unity, not believing Russian propaganda, and knowing very well that nothing of the button type will happen, okay? And trust me, if we were not afraid to go into Iraq, who supposedly had weapons of mass destruction, then what's stopping us now? What's stopping us now? So that's the whole picture. What my answer to Western allies, if you're waiting for a speedy revolution in Russia because of the war in Ukraine, it will not happen, okay? If you are waiting for Russia pressing the button, it will not happen because the entourage of Putin will not allow it, because their livelihood depends on that. And Putin is just a small figure with people around him. This is like a house of cards. In number 3, what Russia is afraid of right now is unity, and showing that unity and standing for what is right. And you've done that in Iraq, you've done that in Serbia, you've done that in Afghanistan. You have no excuses at all for not coming and playing the game shoulder to shoulder, for not being directly involved and standing up for democracy in the rest of the world.
Christina, why, if it's not the fear of nukes, why is the West so slow in helping Ukraine? What's the real reason behind it? There's, okay, no excuses, but what's the reason why?
Well, I think for a long time, and I think that's why only now we're seeing the real weapons kind of coming in slowly, and it's still far not enough. For a long time, they were actually expecting that Russian people will rebel, because they're losing not to NATO, they're losing not to the world, but they're losing to Ukraine. And it's humiliating. And people don't understand why their sons are dying in the war with Ukraine, because Ukraine did not attack Russia. Okay, so when losses became bigger and bigger on the Russian front, and when they lost Kherson, which was a big blow, right? Kharkiv region, that's like, really hitting below the waist, so to say. We start hearing on Russia media rhetorics that they're no longer at war with Ukraine, but they're at war with NATO. Even though there are no NATO forces in the country, right? But they have to justify it somehow to their people. And so the West was afraid that if they would enter into the conflict right away, the Russia would see it exactly as the war with the West, with NATO, And there will be rhetorics like, for our grandfathers, let's grab our shovels and go in the battle, you know, like World War II kind of thing, which would work in Russia, you know, with their brainwashed mentality by now. But now when Russians are seeing that they're losing to Ukraine, you know, all bets are off and still nothing is happening. So what I'm saying, that this strategy of the West saying that something will happen in Russia, within Russian people, if they would realize that they lost 100 plus sons in the war with Ukraine, who did not attack them, right? For no reason. Then they would change. There would be a revolution. There would be uprising. There would be something, you know. But what I'm saying, they did not calculate, they did not take into account that the country has been brainwashed for decades. Generations grew up in this brainwashed machine. Okay, so, and they will not rebel. They will not rebel until it truly will touch, you know, the upper echelons. And, you know, trust me, their sons will not go to fight this war. You know, so when I'm saying, okay, maybe 500,000 soldiers plus could start something within Russia, but still on a smaller scale. But 500 plus Russian dead soldiers for Ukraine would mean, you know, life or death for all Ukrainian nation. And that's what I'm saying. What's the point on waiting for Ukrainians to die? What's the point on waiting for more children to die, or more soldiers to die, to guard you from this terror? Because it will not change the mentality of Russia within. And that was the game that essentially was played at that poker table from day one. And we're seeing that it's failing because of propaganda machine. So my plea right now, there are all reasons to stand shoulder to shoulder. There are all reasons to combat terror and terrorist state, just as it was done before, you know, because nobody's going to press the button. It's the end of Russia, and they know it. Nobody is going to do revolution tomorrow. We already waited for a year with 100,000 plus deaths. Nothing has happened, and we've seen the, you know, pathetic brainwashed machine in action. And how long Ukraine can protect with their own bodies the rest of the world, that's right now the biggest question. And it's very cruel to put that on the shoulders of Ukrainians when the whole world is at stake.
Thank you, Christina, for your interview.
You're welcome. And thank you for caring and doing a great job. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
З Різдвом Христос народився.
Славімо його!